Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health here on the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. I am Todd Rennebaum. Don't miss next week. I'm speaking with Jason. He's from the UK and he has a podcast called the Rainy Days Podcast. And it's also a mental health podcast. He's the host of that and he suffers from, or he has experience with, I'm sure he suffers at times, with borderline personality disorders. So it's a whole episode about him and his life growing up and what is exactly borderline personality disorder. And he talks about a little bit about, the stigma behind it and things like that. So that's a really great episode. I mean, they're all really great episodes, but that one is also a really great episode. So listen to that one. And I'd just like to thank everyone for listening. The last few weeks, the numbers have been going up, and I've had quite a few really cool guests. Right from the beginning of the show, if you ask me, for over a year now, I've had really cool guests. Some of them have been a little more higher profile lately, which is cool, and I just appreciate everyone for listening and for the support. If you don't mind, I'll seriously just take 10 seconds. And you can do it. You don't even have to stop the podcast. If you could just leave a rating or a review on Apple, preferably a rating on the Apple podcast if you're listening on Apple, and on Spotify, I believe they have it as well. So you should be done already. That's how quick it and easy it is to do. And feel free to follow me on Instagram at Bunny Hugs Podcast. It's also Bunny Hugs Podcast on TikTok, and on Twitter, Bunny Hugs Podcast, I think, on there as well or something, and on Facebook. But I'm probably most active on Instagram. Okay, so now this week's guest, her name is Terra Newell, and she is a really, really sweet lady. However, she did have to kill somebody, and for good reason. Was out of self-defense. You probably have heard her story before, or at least have heard of the TV show that's based on her story, Dirty John. That's on Netflix. There's also a documentary based on her and her mother's story. It's all started from a podcast called Dirty John. She's been on Oprah. She's been on like every talk show in the US, I think. So her story is, she kind of explains the story, but if you don't know the story, her mother was dating this psychopath guy she met online. Her and Terra and her sister did not like their new stepfather, I guess, technically. And he tried to kill her. He was stalking her at one point, and she managed to take care of him, basically. So it's a fascinating story. So no wonder she's been all over the place. And finally, she decided to come on my show. Bless her. Anyway, we talk about her trauma. We talk about different therapy modalities she's used. We talk about her upcoming book, her podcast that she has some episodes out on. I actually tried speaking to her quite a while ago, and we got on Zoom. We talked for about a good 10 minutes, and then she informed me that she had to go throw up. So we had to reschedule. We kind of make a joke about it at the end of this episode, but I was so scared that I was not going to be able to get her on the show after that, but it turned out great. So without further ado, I give you Terra Newell.
So my mom married a psychopath, didn't know he was a psychopath. She ended up leaving him and he ended up coming after me and attacking me. and I was able to defend myself and get the knife from him, from a knife attack, basically. And I killed him in self-defense. And it all got turned into a podcast, a story on Dateline, a TV series on Bravo, and just kind of blew up. And it was kind of crazy because, the victim doesn't normally come out winning in these situations. So I think that it really just brought a light to the situation and how this happens to so many women and how so many people are just conned.
Why do you think your story in particular really grabbed the nation or the world even?
So I think it was, there's this family from Orange County, that's a wealthier region. And a lot of stories are actually drawn from Orange County because of this wealthy society that we're kind of in down here. And it's just a different niche, and it's very wealthy. There's lots of large houses and stuff. And my mom was a successful interior designer, and this guy came into her life, and it was just kind of shocking how a woman who has everything going for her could get into this kind of relationship. And so it kind of created this awareness of like these, and I hate to use the word Dirty John because that is my attacker's name. It is not someone that you just call a con artist. It's not someone that you call that pulls one over. These are con artists. These are narcissists. These are people that are abusing other people. It's not fair to call them Dirty Johns to me.
So that nickname has stuck for like other con artists?
Yes. So the name Dirty John, like I get in my inbox on the daily, and I want women to know this and men to know this also. Like, it doesn't really make me feel good to hear that you have been with a Dirty John, because that has been my story, my case. And, there are people that I do share my story with because he has terrorized so many people, and it's fair for those people to call him by that name. But, when you're in it, and you're in a con artist situation, you have to be aware that I had to kill this guy, and I don't have to kill every con artist. So it's like, it's different to me. And especially since he was a psychopath. And when you say you're with a Dirty John, I'm like thinking, okay, this is a psychopath. This person tried to kill me. But then you're telling me, and you're absolutely valid to have these feelings, but you need to be like, I was in a toxic relationship. This person was so toxic. This person manipulated me. This person love bombed me, and call it what it is rather than calling it my abuser's name.
Yeah, I can imagine that's tough to hear because, like, no, you're not with a Dirty John. My mom was with a Dirty John, Dirty John.
Yeah. And Tanya was, and, those women weren't. And we need to, call people what they are, abusers and con artists, manipulators.
Yeah. So when did you realize that John was a real, lack of a better term, piece of shit?
So before I even met him, I was getting little like calls from my sister being like, I hate this guy. Mom's with this guy. I just don't like him. And just saying her feelings towards him. And so I knew that my sister has had problems with men in my mom's past before, and we have been super critical towards them. So I wanted to kind of take the step back and be like, well, I want to go in it with an open mind. And so I went into it, and I went down to meet him. My mom was moving into her place on Balboa, and I was with my ex-boyfriend, and we brought down our 3 dogs at the time. And just his vibes were not the most friendly vibes, but he was living with my mom, and he claimed that he loved dogs and stuff, but he didn't want to interact with me and stuff. So I started just to pick up on these feelings that he hated me, he didn't want me. And it's kind of weird because like when you're saying like that, when you're first meeting someone, people are thinking like, you know, she's a little out of tune, you know, when I'm actually very in tune. I just didn't know how to regulate my emotions as best as I do now.
Right.
So, you know, it was, and also too, when you're yelling and you're telling people these things in a different tone, there's actually a part of like the eardrum that closes off to like the yelling. So you're not able to actually fully hear someone when they're yelling at you. So, you know, without me saying this in the kindest way, my mom really wasn't able to see like, hey, something's not right here. And so she wasn't able to lean into her own tuition where I had my intuition going crazy and I just didn't know how to share what was happening.
Was this the first real big test of your intuition, or did you know you had good intuition before this event?
I say it was a test of my intuition because I was never taught to go off of my intuition, even though as human beings, we are highly intuitive. And, you know, if you think about dogs, they have, we have more cells in our stomach than a dog has in its entire body. So if you think about how intuitive dogs are, we actually have a lot more intuition than that. So it's time to like lean into this intuition. And I feel like there's so many things that kind of shame it. Like if you grew up super religious, at least I did, I was kind of taught not to lean into these visions or whatever because they were something from the devil. And for my case, that's not true. I think it's like God giving me this gift and whatnot. But, you know, there's so much shame around intuition, especially back in the 90s and whatnot, where now we're kind of coming and promoting that, like, hey, we are intuitive beings. It doesn't mean that we're all psychics and stuff, but we're intuitive beings. And we need to really tune into our bodies and to our ancestors because our bodies are amazing and our bodies are here to survive. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but you know, if there's a threat or if you're on stage or anything, your body is telling you like, hey, like something is not normal in this moment. So our bodies are just amazing, intuitive souls.
If intuition's for the devil, yours actually may perhaps saved you from the devil, right?
Yeah, that is true.
And I guess another thing that may have set off some red flags is like their relationship was not, you know, it was maybe a couple months before they moved in together and started getting married and stuff.
Yes. So their relationship, he moved in, but my mom, it was weird. My mom didn't really let me know he moved in, or she didn't know. It was like he just moved in and it happened. And so my mom wasn't really aware that he moved in, but then I kind of felt she did know. It was just kind of this limbo. So I just was unaware of like what she was aware of, if that makes sense. But he ended up just moving in into this new place in Balboa where my mom got because he couldn't be at the other apartment because my sister lived there and my sister had issues with him.
It makes me wonder if your mom wasn't telling you guys stuff, maybe her intuition was working because she knew this is probably not a good thing if I'm not going to tell my daughters about it. So
yeah, the hard thing with intuition is when it's been shut off for so long and you've been told not to listen to it, it's like, how do you decipher what's true and what's not? And then also, I have a lot of clients where I talk to what is a trauma like response and what is intuition. Because sometimes we get into these situations where we start writing off every single guy, every single thing they do. And then I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. is this really a red flag? Is this your intuition? Or is this literally just a trauma response of you not wanting to let that person into your life and be vulnerable and be at that place where you feel you should be? And we have to kind of decipher and go through like, okay, I did this, I did that, and did that. That doesn't really align with intuition. It aligns more so with my past traumas. Or, this isn't a red flag. This isn't a red flag. This isn't a red flag. I'm leaning into my trauma.
Right. I see. It's a fine line then, is it? Or people just hope it's intuition, but it's actually a trauma response?
So, well, it's so hard to say because especially if you've been living in trauma and in a lot of these past toxic relationships, you have to kind of go through the therapy. And I tell everyone that when they're in a toxic relationship and they get out of that toxic relationship, they have to go about it as if it were addiction. And they have to go kind of through like their 12-step program of releasing and getting away with it, because they have to see what they were attached to in the first place. So I think that a lot of times people bring their triggers and not decipher through the red flags and intuition and stuff, if that makes sense. So me as a coach, that's really what I try to work with my clients, and then also work with the nervous system, because our nervous systems are even jacked up because we've been living in fight or flight mode for forever with these toxic people. So it's like relearning how to be a human in a different environment.
Right. Gotcha. A bit like PTSD then, really. You got this PTSD from this crappy relationship, and you're treating every relationship like that crappy one. And you're so scared that it's going to turn into another crappy relationship that you end up sabotaging it because of these kind of behavioral patterns or these survival mode.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Did you resent your mom at the time because she kind of pushed you away? He put pressure on her to, have some distance between you and your sister?
Definitely during that time when my mom was with him, there was this conflict of me feeling unwanted by her and me feeling as if I was losing my mom. And I don't think there was resentment during that time at all. I think maybe there was resentment against John, if anything, but never my mom, because first of all, I was in a toxic relationship. I got hit by a car by this one guy and stuff. So, and I went back to situations like that. So,
wait, your boyfriend hit you with a car?
Well, he was like, not technically ever my boyfriend, because we were always in this limbo, but it was this weird toxic relationship. And I ended up, he was on meth and stuff, and I didn't know this. And I got in the car with him, and then, it's a big story and stuff. I'll talk about it in my book when it comes out one day. I'm working on a book, but got to get it sold and everything. But it will be in there because there's a lot more details to it and whatnot. But I was in a toxic relationship with him, and I was never technically his girlfriend, but it was like this weird limbo thing where he hung out with me every single day. And then I just had love and I had empathy for him. And today that person has actually passed away, so I'm able to give more details about it, but I had empathy for him, and I understood what it was like to be in a toxic relationship. So I really had a lot of empathy for my mom and a lot of understanding for her.
I see. So instead of resentment, you almost you could relate to her, and so you gave empathy. Gotcha.
Yeah. Because, her toxic relationships, the dynamic that she had in those is the dynamic I repeated in some of mine. So, monkey see, monkey do. And how could I not relate to someone that I learned these behaviors from? And, she probably learned these behaviors from her mom, and her mom learned these behaviors from her mom. And it's like this ongoing generational cycle, but now we're breaking that cycle.
Right. Well, that's good. People that are listening have heard me talk about this a million times and they're tired of it. But I just want you to know that I feel the same way about me in my life. I'm in recovery of addiction and anxiety and all types of stuff. And it's been hard. I think it's also generational. So,
Yeah.
and partly that's why I do this podcast, is so others can relate and stuff. And so, yeah, it's hard to do, but it feels good to maybe nip this trauma in the bud that's been going on for generations. So
Yeah.
good on you.
Thank
And
you.
is your mom proud of what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think so. And, I'm proud of what she's doing even too, because there's awareness in her traits that have been toxic. And she's really putting forth the energy to fix those toxic traits with herself too.
Perfect. So how were you able to fight him off? Like, he was a bigger man with a knife. You're a smaller girl with no knife.
There's a lot of factors that I think went into that day of me being able to survive. I think that first, it really helps me watching The Walking Dead and watching all those criminal shows, because I really had that underlying education of how to hold a knife, how to defend someone with actually doing the work. And then it's like monkey see, monkey do. And you don't I just look back to studies where what children watch on TV affects their lives and stuff. And that is absolutely true. It doesn't mean that you go and you fight zombies every day, but maybe in a circumstance like mine, or, maybe if they did have a smaller limbic system in their brain, they might be prone to want to do these things that are on TV and learn these behaviors. But unless you have the empathy, you don't really pick that up. And instead you just learn okay, you learn the factors about serial killers. If you watch NCIS, or if you watch CSI, you learned about all the cool, interesting things that they use to catch these killers. And then if you watch Dexter, you learn how to kind of be a serial killer.
That's true.
But you don't actually do it unless you're in my situation. And you absolutely have to defend yourself.
If that's the case, then my son, who plays Grand Theft Auto, he's probably going to be very good at stealing cars and shooting sex workers and selling drugs.
If it comes to apocalyptic state, he might got it. He could get you the car, but, unless it comes to that, I don't promote that.
Okay. I'll tell him to stay cool.
Which I'm sure he probably will, because I don't think that, he would be inclined to do those things. Hopefully not, right?
Right. Well, we live in a small town in Canada too, so
okay.
If he stole a car, everyone would know it was him anyway. So
okay,
it's not like Los Santos.
Yeah, he would get lots of shame from the neighbors.
That's right. Like, oh, Jack's stealing our car again.
He's been watching that Grand Theft Auto.
Well, if he's not careful, maybe they play Grand Theft Auto and they'd shoot him first. So
that's true.
There's that. So sorry, that was a little sidetracked there. After the dust settled, how did you feel? Was it gratitude that you were able to get away? Was it shame and guilt that you took his life? Or was it like I have no idea. Like, I can't even fathom what was going through your mind.
So after everything happened and his death kind of settled and everything, I was in a state of shock. I didn't know. I wanted everybody to think I was okay. I wanted everybody just to be okay. But I went through this huge traumatic experience. So I really had to process all the emotions that were coming at me. And at first, it was like this initial shock where I wanted everybody to think I was okay. I wanted them to be okay. And then it went into like these fits of rage and triggers. And it's like you feel like you're losing control of everything. And then, going into the next step is like having that understanding of what's happening in that moment and learning, and then so that you could like grow and work on it. And so I really had to process a lot of stuff after everything, because I did feel guilt for killing him. I did feel shame. I just never wanted to kill someone. And to take a life is a huge thing, because when you take a life, there's so many things that are connected to that life. Like there's, he had daughters, and I'm so thankful that his daughters gave me that grace, and they could have resented me for, doing what I had to do. So there was a lot of processing.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what PTSD is all about, really.
Yeah, well, I had a different, there's so many different forms of PTSD. There's like complex PTSD. What I had was like a combative PTSD, like war veterans, although I wasn't, and I said I wasn't living in it for so long, but I actually was living in being stalked and stuff. And that was like being out. I don't want to compare it to Afghanistan because I haven't been out there, but it's like maybe being like 1 or 2 days in Afghanistan and killing one person, but not killing like 50, or not knowing how many people you killed because you're just shooting and you don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really pretty much impossible to compare trauma and pain. So I'm sure you can use Afghanistan as an example and no one will get offended.
Well, I don't want to discount the people that have been in Afghanistan. Right. And I know that I've had friends that where I've been able to relate to them in this aspect, where they told me, they're like, Tara, I've just had a shot, like shoot. I don't know how many people I killed. I don't know how many kids I killed. I don't know what I killed, but I've killed.
Right.
And I hate to laugh, but it's like, that is the brutal reality sometimes of it. And that's what that person has to accept.
People actually came and thanked you, like including like his ex-wife and his sisters and stuff. Like, how did you, were you grateful for that? Or was it like, I don't know. Like you said, you don't want to take a life. Pardon me?
I was very grateful for that because it validated me taking his life. And I saw the harmful effect that he brought to everyone. And so it definitely did help. I just wish that, like, when everybody kind of sees this first initial shock and happen, like, they think about, me in that circumstance. And then, as the story begins to blow up more, like people start to be more in their own ways and they just want their story to be shown and shared. So I think like there was a lot of like, oh, this is my story. This is my story. And it is like a lot of people's stories in a way. But I was the person that didn't ask for this to happen. I was the person that didn't engage with him. I was the person that told my mom to stay away from him. And I was the person that got stabbed and I could have gotten killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you actually suffered physical injuries too. Like, It wasn't like
Yes.
you just took the knife away and used it on him. Like he was stabbing
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would
So
be very
I
traumatic.
really, yeah, I want people to know that, like, yes, there's story to this, but at the end of the day, like, my story should be told. And that's why I feel like I should get my book out.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with writing a book. I wrote one
Yes.
myself. It's a kid's book,
Okay.
though. Sometimes daddy cries. Anyway, I just throw a plug for my own book in my own show there. Do you have
There
a
we
name?
go.
Do you have a name for your book yet?
So I'm waiting to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a few ideas, but I can't really like say them out loud because hey, you never know if someone wants to steal my story title. And then it gets turned into something. So, I have to like be careful of what I do say. But I hope it will be a good one.
It's not a coloring book, is it?
No, definitely not. And I don't think it's a book to like give your children either,
Right. Right.
unless
Well,
they're going through a really difficult time and they're like, well, you went through trauma. Here you go.
right. Or, I mean, you could give it to your children if you're dating a real piece of shit. And then,
Yeah, but then see, there's part of the child's brain that isn't able to disconnect from certain things from like their mother or father figures.
even as
And they
adults,
um no, I
like
believe there's
adult
like this.
children.
No, their brain change. Like there's a certain time. I don't know when. I think it's like around the There's like the stage, the teen stage. Your brain starts to separate from your parents a
Mm.
little bit more, and you're able to kind of. It's just like how we evolve. You're at
Mm-hmm.
your teenage stage. You have to be more independent, start like learning to be an adult a little bit, and start to separate from your parents. Around that stage is actually when you begin to like have those thoughts. So maybe my parent wasn't perfect and stuff.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So once you hit that stage, you can get your kid the book.
Yes, that's a perfect stage. Yes, because then they are not going to want to please mommy. They're able to step outside their own zone and think for themselves.
Is that your dog?
Yeah, sorry.
I thought my beard was rubbing the microphone for a second. How many dogs do you have?
Well, this one's my mom's. I'm watching her dog
Oh,
right now. I have just Dixon wherever he's at.
oh, I see. Okay. Do you gotta use your dog as an emotional support dog at times?
Um, so I mean, there's certain situations where he definitely is a comfort to me, but he is not trained like Cash was. Cash was trained to like come up and regulate my nervous system and just lay on me. Where Dixon, he's also 8 months, so he
Oh,
still has that puppy energy, and he doesn't necessarily know, hey, mom needs me to calm her down right now.
Cash is a very Orange County kind of dog name.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
I thought it was like I when I went to Texas, I saw a lot more Cashes there.
Well, I guess that's for a different reason. That's Johnny Cash, or
Yeah.
did you name him for like money, cash?
So in all honesty, my ex and I were stoners, so we named him after a cash bowl.
Well, thanks for the honesty. So, do you still go to therapy for, well, not just this, but for anything, I guess?
Yes, I go to therapy. Right now I'm in therapy once a week because I'm going back for EMDR therapy. I have a few more childhood traumas that came up that kind of came into my memory age 29. So I have to process through those now.
Hmm.
And I'm learning how to cope and put that into effect in my own life because it started to affect my relationships in ways. And now I have to get a hold on that.
Can you explain EMDR therapy a bit?
So EMDR therapy is eye movement desensitization. I can never say this part right. Desensitization, repetition, and it's basically you go through your trauma, and you have like either these tappers, you have like a finger going back and forth, where you're able to process through your trauma and stay in the present moment, where it creates this bilateral effect with the brain. And it really helps you kind of rewire your brain as you process your trauma.
Interesting. I don't quite get it, but interesting.
Yeah, well, when you go into EMDR, one of the things that I think is crazy, and this is what a lot of my clients say is when they go into EMDR too, is that everything is interconnected.
Okay.
So it's like you'll start off with like a trauma here, and then it will go to that trauma, and it'll go to another trauma, and then you're like, oh wait, and then you just connect the dots.
Okay. And so do you, like you said, you have clients, you also offer EMDR therapy to your clients?
So I'm not a licensed EMDR therapist, so I don't offer that to my clients, but I definitely coach them through when they're going through that time, or if they need that space. And then I do guided meditations that could be kind of similar to EMDR. However, I am not a therapist, and it's not technically EMDR, it's a guided meditation, but it helps you lean more into your trauma, where you're able to go deeper, and it still helps you connect the dots. But EMDR is just like, it's magic. But when you go into EMDR therapy, prepared to be raw.
You're considered a life coach then?
Yes, I'm a life coach.
Okay. And you also have a course on toxic relationships?
Yes, so I have 2 courses right now that are starting in May. I have No More Toxic Dating. That's a 5-week workshop. And then I also have a trauma workshop that's a 5-week workshop also. And I think it's a lot of fun because we do 5 live calls, but then we have homework each week that we go through. And you really learn about your nervous system. You learn about your relationship patterns, your generational patterns, and everything. I think it's just really great start, or it's like the next step if you've been in your healing process and you want to know more. I think it's creates a lot of awareness and gets you to the right steps and gives you the right tools to move forward in your healing process.
Okay. So it's not so much about not dating toxic men. It's more about letting go of a past toxic relationship and moving forward.
So I hope that I will teach you to avoid these factors in the next relationship, but I can't guarantee that you're not going to go to the next relationship and it's not going to be toxic.
Right.
Because
okay.
I'm not going to be right by your side telling you, hey, that's not a good one.
I didn't watch the show, but I listened to the podcast,
Okay.
and it's like, yeah, you just seem like the most gentle, sweetest lady on earth, and then, but yet your body kicked in to defend itself. Like that's just, it still blows me away. So actually, when the podcast and the show came out, did that kind of trigger your PTSD or anything?
Yes, it definitely did, because when you're looking at these shows, well, at first you're like thinking like, oh, it's TV. It's all like fluff and fun and everything's great. And I worked in production, and so I was excited to have something that was being made. Because it's like my ex was like, I want this script to be like, made. I want this to be made. I want to make this short. I want to do this. And then it's like, whoa, my life gets turned into a TV show. And I kind of like was like, well, I got you made. And then it hits. And then you're like, oh shit, that's my life.
Right. I remember
And
now. It sucked.
yeah, you're like, oh, that happened in my life. Oh, and it didn't necessarily like happen like it did on the TV, but there's like, you're like, oh, this is about my trauma, not about like Gilmore Girls.
It's very different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to go through every episode with my therapist at the time
Interesting.
and process through what was triggering me. And I started to become scared of Eric Bana. So I actually had to meet him, and he doesn't know this, and he didn't want to meet me because he was like, how could I play this evil person and then meet this girl that like,
Yeah.
has such a sweet soul, and then she had to do what she did, and it just like, it would affect his character that he had to play. So he didn't want to meet me either, but I needed to meet him to know that this wasn't John. This was a show. It wasn't my reality. And so I actually met him. I think they were filming like the last day. And I met him that day. And he came into the trailer to get his hair and makeup done and stuff. And I was there getting my hair and makeup done for, I was just like a background person. And he sat next to me, and I've worked on set before, and this is my show. So I can say hi to whoever I want, but I have been trained like you never say hi to an actor or actress. You keep it professional, like they're there to work and you don't bother them. So I was just there in the chair, like being all quiet and not engaging with him because I was taught not to engage. And then he like starts talking to me, and then that allows me to like talk to him. And that was so helpful in that moment. And then at the premiere, Cash and Cash was sitting on his legs, and he was just like putting his head up, looking at Eric Bana and just loving on Eric Bana. And that is the type of energy that John never got from Cash.
Right. So that kind of set your mind at ease a little bit.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Ah. So what do you think of the show? Do you think it was well done, or were you like, what the hell is this? This is garbage.
Well, when it's your show, you're always going to have a biased opinion.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, that character didn't play me like quite like I think she did. But a lot of my friends are like, oh my gosh, Julia Gardner like played you on point, Terra. And I'm like, well, I like to hear that because, it's someone's outside view of me. And I just always like, but no, I think Julia did an amazing job. I think all the actors actually did an amazing job. If I were to make it, I would probably make it a little different because I would want it like exactly how it was.
Right.
But in film and TV, that would be very hard legality.
Yeah. Was there any sex scenes? I didn't watch the show.
Well, definitely not with me. There was like a few with my mom, or like not my mom, but like Connie Britton and Eric Bana.
Oh, okay, good.
And my grandma said she didn't like the show because of that.
Right. Grandmas. Yeah. So now you have a dating course, you have trauma work you do with people, you do life coaching, and you have a podcast of your own. What's your podcast about?
So my podcast is kind of on a hiatus right now, but I'm going to bring it back. And I just have to have certain goals for different times. And my goal during this time is to really work on my book and create that awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So once I get my book to a place where it's at least sold, then I'll bring back my podcast, because people don't understand podcasts take time, they take money, they take a lot of energy. And I got really inspired by this one person by listening to their podcast, Moving Past Murder. And this person is, we'll call Yearly Entry. He is a person in the true crime space, but he was 11 years old and overheard his mom get murdered, and then was 12 years old and on the witness stand basically was a key witness that put his dad in jail. And he's created like this podcast, he's created this documentary, and I was on it, and well, on the podcast, not the documentary, but I was on his podcast and just so inspired to like level up with my podcast, because I never like thought of a podcast being edited like a show.
Right.
And just like the way that it's edited, I like how he's edited his podcast. So I want to like kind of do more alignment towards like that stuff and make it just a little bit more production value higher, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, for sure. How many episodes of Time Out with Terra do you have right now?
I think I have like 44 episodes.
Oh, okay. So people can still listen to your old episodes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And they're out there. There's a lot of great guests. I just want to do it better when I get to the place where I want with my book, because I feel like I'm not done yet doing the things I need to do. And I have a lot more potential, and I've been lazy.
Are you still a stoner?
I'm a little bit here and there, but I'm really trying to, if I do want to take a hit, I've been smoking since I was 17. So if I do want to take a hit, I really try to lean into why I want to do that before I even go into that action.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, does that stop you from doing it once in a while? Why you want to do it? Or you're like, okay, that's why, and then you just do it?
Well, I don't drink anymore either.
Okay.
So I feel like I have to have a vice somewhere. And at least if I'm not overdoing it and I'm able to hold myself accountable with it, I'm able to have that in my life. But if it gets to the point where it is really not bettering my life in any way, then that's the time to get rid of it.
Gotcha. Good. So what'd you learn about yourself through this whole mess?
Everything. I'm like, from that point, my life has been an ongoing learning, just healing journey. And I'm just so happy to have that, because man, knowledge is power and knowledge is great. And just hearing other people's experiences, and the knowledge changes every day. So like listening to a podcast like this and hearing people's experience, I think is so important. I at least try to listen to a podcast a day.
Yeah, me too. I absolutely love podcasts. I love podcasting. I get to meet cool people like you. It would just be nice if I could make some money on it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, see, that's why I had to stop mine also, because I'm like, well, I'm not making money off of this right now. Let's go into my book where I can eventually make some money from that,
Yeah. I'm actually that period too, where I want to level up my podcast and put it on YouTube and do it more often. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Well, it's like a learning journey too. I feel like I had to be in that podcast space and get that experience, and then realize what I needed to do to make it grow.
Right. And I've been told by many other podcasters that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and that it's very slow and gradual, and it'll take time, but as long as you can stick with it eventually, I mean, it'll evolve.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Something that is actually super helpful when you're starting a podcast is to have 3 episodes lined up for that week.
Right. Yeah.
Because that helps boost you on the algorithm for the podcast.
Right. Yeah. I did do that on my first week, actually. This is, it's been a year today, I think. What's the date today?
Oh, that's awesome. April 11th.
It was a year yesterday that I started.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
So, thanks for being my 1-year guest.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm happy I didn't throw up today.
Thank you so much, Terra. I very, very much appreciate it. And I'm just so grateful that you were willing to speak with me twice, actually. And that, you didn't throw up this time. So that's amazing. I love it when I don't make women throw up. Like I said, next week, I'm speaking with Jason. I don't know his last name right now. We'll have it for next week. And we're going to talk about borderline personality disorder and his upbringing and some things like that. So stay tuned for that. And don't forget to follow me on social network. And please leave a rating and review. Thank you for listening. And please subscribe, rate, and review however you are listening to this podcast. It only takes a moment, and it really helps the show out with getting noticed. This episode has been sponsored by Penny University Bookstore, 3104 13th Avenue. Call 639-571-2186 and check out their online bookstore at pennyu.ca. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is supported by Connexus. Wellness, however you define it, is achievable. You don't even need to figure it all out by yourself. Talk to Connexus. They'll give you guidance, motivation, and the push you need to reach your goals. They've got you. They're your financial partner, and they know you can achieve your very best, your financial best. Prove them right. Start right at Connexus Credit Union. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is also sponsored by Direct West. Are you a business owner looking for new avenues to promote your business? Direct West digital billboards are a great opportunity to highlight a new product, new promotion, or anything else you'd like your customers to know about. You can get local, expert marketing help for your business at directwest.com. If you are having a mental health crisis, please call the Canadian Crisis number at 1-833-456-4566. In Saskatchewan, the mobile crisis team in Prince Albert is 306-764-1011. In Regina, it's 306-525-5333, and in Saskatoon, it's 306-933-6200. Don't forget to check out my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Sometimes Daddy Cries is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Available on Amazon.ca. I'll see you next time. This is Todd Redebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Bye.